I will call to order the meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission for September 10th, 2019. This meeting is being both audio and video recorded. Are there any comments on the agenda? Hearing none, it's approved. You have in front of you the July 12th and August 13th draft minutes. You received a handout with the minutes with some corrections, not of substance. But if you'd rather wait a month to approve that, that's fine. Otherwise, we can approve them both tonight. What is your pleasure?
Do you want to mention what some of the corrections could be?
Sure, I can
additions,
mention.
and then we
Sure. I
can
mean,
make that decision.
in the paragraph with respect, oh no, that's the wrong set. I can't read
There you
those
go
out
again.
loud. Oh, I don't know, this wasn't changed. What's on page 2? The third flying bullet point. What are Whitaker plots? Was that changed in the?
You just said what was it, and we didn't change it in.
I just said put a,
Today at 4, so we just kind of like correct.
yeah, do we know what a Whitaker plot is? What is a Whitaker plot?
Go ahead, no.
Mr. Carberg, please.
No, Carberg, Assistant Airport Manager. I guess we're talking about something environmental. A Whitaker plot is a standard ecological survey plot. It's of a fixed boundary with subplots that are measured repeatedly. It's the basic standard for forestry and botanical monitoring. One of the basic
All right,
standards.
thank you. Now, 2 technical questions. Should it be capitalized?
I did capitalize it.
Yes, it should. It's
Did I capitalize it?
All right, should it be,
it's named after a Dr. Whitaker.
should
so-
it be in quotes? A Whitaker plot be in quotes?
No, but I believe it should be capitalized.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Score
so
for the win.
but the 2 bullet points above that, I eliminated the capital A on affiliate. Down on the grant signing letter of authorization, it's changed to read as has been done, it should say. I missed that. As has been done in past years to enable the chair to be the sole signatory of grant letters. So that was added in. Under the draft first amendment, airport policy, Mr. Drake reported that this is occasioned by a religious group applying to hand out leaflets. And in the last paragraph, Mr. Rafter clarified for the commission, I don't know what that was all about, the designated area. Anyway, that's all right. On the next page, under project updates, taxi AE runway 624, second line regarding the opportunity for funding, they were too far apart. They just needed to be quick. And then down on the next to last line and said, caused the runway to deteriorate more quickly rather than quicker. I hope you'll approve of that, Mrs. Tom.
More quick.
It's a stylistic change.
More quick.
No, more quickly.
Not more quickly?
No. More is already telling you that. It's the yellows with bell lines on it.
Oh, I agree with that. If you
Okay.
want to, if you want to
No,
take
I'm not going
exception.
to disagree with you. I'm just going
And
to
I-
say what I've learned and remember.
I said the video, and then under the paragraph under statistics, the video was, instead of captured, filmed by Preston Harriman. And then over on page 4, I changed it to, Mr. Drake identified himself as the commission chair, but said he was not representing the commission as a whole. And down below that, the airport needs a system that is more responsive and acts more quickly because of time-critical projects and the increasing need for appropriations between town governments. Mr. Drake characterized the committee as being very engaged in the discussion and wants to come back to it. And then in the next sentence, Mr. Gasparo asked about the status of the ramp noise study. Those were the changes I suggested that have been incorporated. Are there any other changes that anybody like? Any other comments? Is there a motion to approve the minutes of July 12th and August 13th, 2019?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. May I have a motion, please, to ratify the ratify the warrant of August 21st and approve the warrant of September 11th, 2019.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll
Is there-
second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Is there public comment on items not on the agenda at this time? Hearing none. Pending leases and contracts, Mr. Rafter?
The first is a lease amendment.
You
with
have
the
a
hu-
handout for the,
Oh, I'm sorry.
May I make a request for our next, whatever it is, caping or whatever you want to call it on here? Is that could we have all the leases separate so that we don't have to go through everything to get to it? You know what I'm saying? If you would just.
well, you
put
can
them-
hand them out.
Yeah, but
I
as a,
don't-
se-
I don't
as
care
a
about
separate
that. I'm
file
just thinking of
electronically.
All that information, to get to the next thing, you have to go through so much stuff. So if it was just a separate attachment.
Oh, you mean with all the leases and the
Yes.
actual documents, yeah.
Yeah, because, I was looking at something and all of a sudden I've got to go through all these pages.
So I think there may be two ways of doing that. There's a way of doing a PDF where you can just, go to one chapter or whatever. But another way is just do it as a separate document.
In one PDF.
Okay, that's what I was asking for.
Yeah, that's what we'll do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just didn't have the right-
You're gonna have to move from one PDF to another
That's
to look
okay.
at stuff. Is
Yeah.
that okay with everyone? You need to do it the same for everyone.
Yeah, I think it's better because if you have to go back, you do have to thumb through a lot of
Yeah.
pages.
Because, yes, that would work
Is that
for me.
agreeable
Thank
to
you.
everybody?
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Rafter.
That's
Well, You
okay.
got what you wanted.
Well, we're trying the electronic stuff, so that's good.
Yeah, we're testing this
Well,
out.
I know, and that's why I thought.
All right, yeah, we have two leases and,
So there's a lease amendment, and that's for the Hungry Minnow for $234 for an additional 9 square feet that they needed for some storage. The next is a lease agreement with American Airlines for storage of their equipment, and that's for $2,100. The commencement date is backdated to October 1st of 18. Next is a contract with McFarland Johnson for $240,990, and that is Part B of the EIR. There will most likely be a Part C as well because we're going to have to add in runway 624 based on some conversations with the environmental entities that we had last week and the fact that we are now adding the rehabilitation of 624 into our capital improvement plan within the next 5 years. Then we have a contract with MHQ for $62,158, and that is to replace dump truck and maintenance of Ford F-550.
do we get rid of the old one?
Yes, I believe we will.
I shouldn't really say this, but I think that's a pretty reasonable price for a dump truck, what
Yeah,
you're
it's,
paying
it's
for
a
a car
smaller dump,
nowadays.
but yeah.
Any questions or comments on any of these? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. All right, crew quarters.
We've received the initial draft of the model that was prepared by McFarland Johnson for the risk return, if you will, on the crew quarters. We had made some comments tweaking it, and we're supposed to get the final draft back to us by the end of this month. We'll have it ready for next month. What I would suggest, though, is that we have after presentation of it to the commission, that we have a subcommittee meeting to review not only the model, but what some of the assumptions are. The model was very well done. It's just now a matter of, as we either get real information we can plug it in, or as we have a consensus on what some of the assumptions are, we can plug them in. And then it will tell us what our financial risks are for the project. And once we do that, then we have to then determine where in line that would fall in terms of overall capital projects long-term. So again, the initial draft was very well put together, but there were some things that we needed to clean up before it came to the commission, and we'll have that for you next month.
All right.
Next,
Any questions? Thank you. Go ahead. First Amendment.
we have for approval, First Amendment airport policy, and I would say it's very timely. We had a ad hoc protest a couple of weeks ago on the corner of Milestone and Bunker Road. The police department responded, put some parameters around it. We allowed them to do their protest for about an hour and a half or so, but it just was not, there were no guidelines, and that's why we told them that's why we're doing this policy. In the future, if they wanted to do anything, they'd have to follow this, so.
And the town doesn't have a policy, right?
No, and part of that protest, it was on town property, and then some of it was on our property. We asked to move off of our property because there was a hazard. They were right along Milestone Road, and with cars going by at 45 miles an hour, we didn't think that was safe, so they moved them over to near the bike path on Milestone, which is town property, so.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this?
I had one
Yes, sir.
on the fourth page, which is page 83 in our packet. Underneath where there is, it says it's the page that starts with permit required, and it lists the 6 categories. The second paragraph after that reads, upon presentation of a complete request and any documentation required by the policy, the airport manager or designee will issue a permit within 7 to 10 business days, and so on. I would suggest that the word will should be changed to may, so that it's not
Required.
compulsory. You know, it couldn't be read that if someone submits all the documents, they get the permit. It should be they submit all the documents and then still at the airport manager's discretion. I mean, that's, maybe I'm nitpicking, but
No,
I don't know, maybe
I agree with that.
the attorneys, I wonder, it just seems the word may is
We
better
have 2
than,
attorneys, we get
better than
3
will
attorneys.
in a case like this.
Sadly.
Yeah, can you show me exactly?
Sure,
where
so
it is?
page
Here.
83.
Oh. Okay.
Tony,
Oh, right here.
Tony, on the policy, it's the
That
word,
second
okay.
to last page,
Okay.
not including the signature page. It's about middle.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
You got it?
I'm seeing.
I see somebody saying, we gave you all
Right.
documents, now you have to
You
give us
have
the
to give
permit."
it.
Right,
So-
right. May issue.
It's like a shell in May.
Hmm.
Gonna go to May.
Or the word will.
I think that's a worthy suggestion. First Amendment is pretty broad, as Dan will no doubt tell, and certainly Andrea would have a paper prepared on that. But I would think,
You
you
better
know,
know.
given the broad grant of power in the First Amendment of the Constitution, they can probably protest wherever they want. These rules may be obviated by some court ruling, but there's no reason not to put may in there. I think that's fine, you know. If we
Right.
don't like it, we could say no, and then let somebody take
And then, but
a ruling on that. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's fine.
otherwise I support the policy.
Any other comments or questions? Is there a motion to
catch.
approve? Oh, is there any public comment on this? Sir, would you come up to the microphone and identify yourself, please?
Well, I was the one who originally was talking to Mr. Rafter about this, and I got this.
Would you
motion.
identify yourself, please?
Jeremy Garcia from the Nantucket Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I just wanted to say thank you guys for drafting this policy. I know we applied for that event initially, and you guys were very helpful. And this policy is very well written, and it's a beautiful policy, and I believe it's gonna be good for anybody who may want to apply there. So I just wanted to express my appreciation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Particularly on Mr. Rafter's behalf, I thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
May I have a motion to approve the policy with the change suggested by Mr. Gasparo?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Uh,
Aye. Opposed? Carried unanimously. I'm going to suggest we go ahead and sign it tonight and sign the paper and then rely on you all to make that change before it is published.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, Town Government Study Committee.
You want me to take this down?
Why don't you start it,
Okay.
yes.
So as the chair previously reported, he had attended a meeting of the Town Government Study Committee. I attended a follow-up meeting, and I prepared a draft paper stating the concerns that we have with the town meeting form of government and the impacts it has on our capital projects. We had a discussion with our attorneys who are very familiar with enterprise law as well as town government structure. And Mina from Anderson and Krieger made a number of comments, and the handout that you have is an updated version of the document that was in your packet. And again, I think it outlines the challenges we face with town government structure as relates to obtaining grants in a timely manner. And in the handout, there are a number of solutions suggested. And Mina presented, I think, as his first one, a very good one that, to summarize it, it's essentially, I think it's a change to the charter or the bylaws of the town that would give the select board with either FinCom or some other level of check and balance the ability to appropriate the funds or allow the appropriation that is required. So it could be done on a more frequent basis. Some of the challenges that we face are the timing of the federal government. The standard or normal time frame does not work to our favor. We lose about 17 months because of it not aligning correctly with town government. One of the solutions that we've been kind of doing is we would put in a large chunk of money for an appropriation, just assuming that that's going to be enough, and sometimes it's not. But what that does is it kind of telegraphs to contractors that they think we have a ton of money for a project and they come in with their high bids. So that's not good, financial planning. And there are times when we don't put enough in and then we need another appropriation, we have to wait for a subsequent town meeting. So there's a number of issues, and it's laid out in the paper there. The other is that that's under the normal course of action and calendar that the federal government uses, but there are many times, because of either continuing resolutions or congressional authorizations, where they will just make available a big pot of money, and we're competing with other airports, and we have to have these projects ready to go in a very quick turnaround. And if we're 9 months away from a town meeting, that doesn't work for us. So we have coming up, as I think I mentioned before, the FAA said they are going to fight diligently for us to get funding for both taxiway Echo and the runway, and that could range anywhere from $20 to $50 million. So we need to be, and they expressed their concern. They said, if we get you this money, will you be able to accept it and meet all the deadlines and things? So I said, we're ready to go for taxiway Echo right now, and we're working on making whatever changes necessary. So I prepared this document with the intention that I'd give it to the commission for whatever you'd like to do with it. If you want to make it as a formal recommendation to the town study committee, we can also present it to town administration and select board for their consideration. But I had asked, my question to the government study committee was if there was a deadline or a critical path that they were following that they needed formal comments by, and they indicated that there was not. So I would just present it for your consideration and direction as to how you'd like to move forward, if anything, with this.
To supplement that, Rick Atherton called me. He's one of the members of the Town Government Study Committee. And he asked me what our thoughts were about going forward with this. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, Mr. Rafter has prepared a paper, and I think the next step is to send the paper to Mr. Brescher and to Mr. Atherton, Mr. John Brescher being the chair of the committee, to let them look at it first, and then to decide how we're going to proceed from there, and how they're going to, what more they want from us, if anything. And then Mr. Rafter also informed me this evening that he had mentioned that we were working on this to the town manager. So she's aware of it, and then seemed quite favorably inclined towards it. Is that correct?
Yes, she said she'd like to see the paper
Yeah.
if, once the commission,
Right.
approved or authorized.
I just have one question. Is that what you sent early, sometime this afternoon? It's already on the website? I know I didn't bring my
Yeah.
magnifying glass, but I read it at home.
Yes.
And I totally agree.
Substantial changes
Right.
on that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think everybody you can get in touch with, select board, town manager, whomever else.
I've talked to Tim. I mean, there are different ways of going about this. One of them is going through the legislature, which is probably cumbersome and difficult, and whether it requires a town meeting vote, for a home rule petition or that kind of thing. I don't know. But the other seems to be this maybe modification of the town charter,
Right.
which would still require a vote of town meeting,
Mhm.
but maybe the way to do it, and maybe something that we could accomplish fairly quickly here, and particularly with the town government study committee.
And Dan, if I may, I think that's that's what's driving the schedule, for us at least. If we would like this to move forward, I think we need to have some warrant article crafted for town meeting. And again, we'll go through this process, but, as long as everybody's on board, we can start getting it takes several months to get an article on there, so we'll need to have that presented probably within the next few months or so.
Right. So I would propose, there are a couple of, this was crafted by Tom and recrafted by Anderson and Krieger. There are a couple of factual errors in it, at least one. They need to be corrected, but if you all are agreeable, I think we should go ahead and send it out with those couple of changes. The specific one that I'm thinking of says the state's other commercial service airports are either sponsored by an independent authority, a county, or a city. Well, that's all true, but it's all, or a town with a town council, namely Barnstable. So that needs to be added in there. And I don't know how Provincetown works, because they do technically have commercial service. But I don't have any reason to believe that.
We reached out to MassDOT to ask if there are any others that, and they couldn't come back with any that were commercial service that had the same form of government.
Well, Provincetown
and
has a
enter-
town meeting, and whether,
But I don't know if it's an enterprise fund. I think it might be
The
a
enterprise
department.
account, that's the issue, isn't it?
but I think we should find out before we.
Okay. And I do believe their capital needs are quite lower than ours.
I had a couple thoughts. I'm thinking that if the commission is all amenable to these, 4 or maybe 3, the first 3 I think would be warrant articles. And at least the first 2, that we should have our council draft those warrant articles now, sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
And then perhaps make the corrections, refine this document one more time, and then formulate it as a letter to the Town Government Study Committee from the commission, per a vote of the commission, signed by the chair, copying the Finance Committee, the Capital Program Committee, the Town Manager, and the Select Board.
I
And
like
have the
that.
draft warrant articles ready, have the document, have it set up so it's to the government.
So it's all ready to go, yes.
It's
okay.
like all packaged.
Yeah, it's
and
like we don't
clearly
have to
see-
do more
You know,
Thanks.
I think I agree. I think it's fine. I suggest that we do go ahead and give this to Brusher and Atherton.
I agree, and get input.
And we can
You know,
circulate it as
that's work
draft
to
or.
refine,
Right.
in case there's something that may be so concerning
Mhm.
that we might wanna change it before it goes to the broader audience. I think that's.
But I think that's a very good idea, Arthur, about crafting the warrant article, having it ready to go,
Yeah.
so.
And then the question would become, who is the sponsor of the warrant article? Ultimately, whether it's the finance committee, the board of, the select board on behalf of the airport commission, would probably be ideal,
Right.
or a good old citizen article if they don't wanna play.
You and
But
I-
don't-
you and I- you and I-
I don't want to play
I
that
don't
game.
think that's the case, but, you know, and like you say, timing, if we were to get this out next month,
Right.
refine it for October, then it would be, and then we wouldn't miss, you know, I don't think a citizen article is really the way to go about these, but you hate to lose your ability to do that with that November deadline.
Mhm. Okay, so we'll have that, we'll circulate the draft with the cleanups, but we'll also have a package ready for next commission meeting with proposed warrant article and everything else ready to go.
And any input that
The letter
may
and-
refine it a little further.
Okay,
The one language I found a little, it just struck me, was item 4 about representative town meeting, that more people remain on island after the summer season. It just didn't quite read to me right.
I don't
When we
think,
don't really have a town, we don't have town meetings in the summer season anyway, so I don't see that.
well,
as-
that's, yeah, there's a few of those suggestions that might address a couple of minor things, but I think that the change in the quorum just don't really address the needs completely. So they just looked at all.
Yeah, I mean,
you
I
know,
think if we're gonna
potential.
go for this, we gotta go for the whole 9 yards,
Yeah,
rather than some of these tweaking things. I mean,
Well, and-
number 5, it would be, I mean,
If-
it's fine, it can be a special town meeting or, and an annual town meeting. You can't, I don't think you can have two, I can't believe you can have 2 annual town meetings.
so would you like,
Well, biannual, right?
we can put that as the proposed recommendation then and go through
Yeah,
and develop the warrant article according to that.
right.
Okay. Number one. we're
Number
talking
one,
about.
yeah,
Number
right, yeah,
one.
not-
So
not
like
5,
number
4 or 5,
right,
yeah.
that's just a,
No, I mean, the others are all sort of,
I mean, that's, yeah,
Here's an
that's
idea.
much more involved, number 4, and
but that's what that committee's there for too.
Mhm.
They were asking for thoughts and comments.
Right.
so good to have it in there, but not
Not
on
as
number
an
1.
article.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I think a combination of 1 and 2. Obviously, the issue of, you know, protecting the town from having to dip into the taxpayer's pocket is important to the extent we can do that. And but I think it should be clear that this would apply to the airport's budget, operating budget, as well as to capital expenditures. Or would it? I mean,
It
two,
may, if we have to do some small funding out of the operating or whatever, there are times when we have to do some of that. I don't know if I would get, I'll work with Mina, the attorney. They understand that it's predominantly capital, but there are times when you might need some from your operating. It's more of a, how should I say this? It's a check and balance to make sure that, okay, this is the project, here's how much you're gonna spend before we commit the big bonding process to it, so that you can get your bids, get everything in line, and get your federal grant.
But there's something to be said for going to the well once for this. And if we could also figure out a way to get rid of the revolver, to me, that would be almost as great an accomplishment as,
But with the change that we just did to the revolver, that helps us in another line of capital. For example, the rehabilitation we're doing to the farm and everything's gonna all come out of that.
Right.
So that's kind of like a dedicated source for it.
Well, I mean, it creates a discipline perhaps.
Yeah.
But it's not, I mean, I'm just wondering if the detriments are stronger than the benefits.
I'll defer to Jamie, but I think having that discipline in that account protects us with the ebbs and flows of the pricing on fuel too,
Well,
so.
only protects us on the one side, it doesn't protect us on the other side.
Yeah, protects us from ourselves as well.
All right, well, I needed to put that on the table because I think, if this is the likelihood of, say, getting 2 buckets of water from the well are pretty unlikely. So I think we should at least think about that a little bit.
Okay,
All right, I would like at least a indication of the commission's willingness for me to go ahead and send this out to Mr. Brusher and Mr. Atherton.
I agree.
Everybody?
I think it should go out like this. I think we can clean it up later.
Yeah,
I think it's nice for them to have our position on this.
Right.
I think they're not very sensitive to our big capital requests anyway. It's always a big shock when you go to town
So-
meeting and
yeah,
somebody
well, I
wants
think, I mean,
$20 million.
yeah,
There's a
So
lot
I-
of head scratching on that. They don't really understand it.
if I may, I'll send a transmittal letter stating this is a draft and that we're working on the final recommended solution, which we'll be discussing in our October meeting, and then forward that upon
right,
approval of the commission.
that's fine.
Okay.
All right. Anything else on that? Now to the weighty invoice approval policy.
This is a proposed internal policy with regard to signing of invoices, allowing Jamie, our finance business manager, to sign up to $25,000 and for fuel invoices as well. It's just distributing some of the work, quite frankly, and as I was telling the chair, when I started here, I wanted to sign every invoice so that I knew where the money was going and how things were operating, and I think I have a pretty good sense, and Jamie certainly knows where the money is and whether or not we have it, so I thoroughly trust her with that, and it would be a tremendous help to me. I will still sign off on the batch or warrants, but each individual invoice would be signed by Jamie. Up to the 25,000 plus fuel, anything above it and capital, I would still sign.
Is there any discussion?
I'm supportive.
Is there a motion to approve the proposed invoice approval policy?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Fourth quarter financial results.
Before I get started in there, I just want to note, and again, Jamie caught this, there was a calculation error on the summary page. Under fiscal year 19 actuals, the surplus deficit on the summary page, it's 3,484,914. That should be 3,559,914. And the fiscal year 18 actuals should be 1,901,317 as opposed to 1,801,317. So that in itself kind of speaks for itself. The fact that we went from 1,000,009 in surplus to 3.5 million. We had a fairly good year. The revenue was up 19% or 2.7 million over last year, and contributing to that is 1.2 million in the fuel revolver cap over last year, which brought in 3.3 million in excess of the 5.2. Significant increase in other category was attributed primarily to reimbursement of a previously completed project back in 2011 or 12 for a bag belt, and we're just starting to get some of that reimbursement money. On the expenses, the total expenditures excluding debt service were up 1.2 million or 9% over last year. And the increase was to the fuel expense primarily. We did have some 17% or $96,000 increase in service and maintenance over last year, and a lot of that was snow removal, maintenance, and mostly runway and taxiway repairs. So, as I said, all in all, fairly good year. It looks like the projected fund balance at the end of the year will be about $3.2 million. So we're projecting some retained earnings, and we'll find out once we get those certified.
Do we know what's in the PFC,
I'm sorry?
the PFC fund at this point?
What is in it?
Yeah, at the end of the year.
No, I'd have to ask Jamie.
When do we recognize that?
It has to be appropriate. That's the other, that's the
Yeah.
other thing. It has to be
Yeah, it
appropriate.
gets collected, put into a fund, but then it has to be appropriate.
We can't touch it.
That's right. Is that in here? That isn't in here, is it?
What, PSC?
No, the fact that,
Oh, in the paper?
any surplus in the fuel revolver or in the PFC fund has to be appropriate.
No, and
And again, it gets back to the question of operating.
well, it does, and there's a line in the regulation, and I forget, 39B and a half or whatever, that governs enterprise funds that talks about the surplus and how it's supposed to go into which fund. So I asked Mina if we should get into that, and he suggested don't even bother with it. Because I was wondering if there wasn't some way we could just use that money, and he said, no, don't even bother with that. So,
Why not, did he say?
I forget his explanation, but if I recall, it said it would go into a fund that was to be used for capital as appropriated. And we got into the whole definition of appropriation and who has the ability to appropriate. And it got into the fact that I believe the only body that has the ability to appropriate funds is the select board, and it is predominantly through town meeting. But there are some exceptions, and one I think that was stated in the paper was the real estate, and Libby had mentioned one other one that they have. So he just said, rather than go down that path of who can appropriate what, let's just stick with the one thing. So I don't know. This is a DOR rule that when we establish these funds, they have to be separate, and it has to go through the whole FinCom town meeting process. And that is for any enterprise fund.
So the PFC funds I know I'm getting back to the other discussion, but the PFC funds would not be subject to appropriation
They are.
by the Board of Select?
Yes, because we are an enterprise fund.
By the Select Board or the town meeting?
Town meeting.
Yeah,
Town
I
meeting.
know.
Well, the select board is the one that appropriates it through the mechanism of town meeting.
So you
That's
need a
my
positive vote from both of them.
They have to get direction from town meeting to be able to do the actual appropriation.
But they're the ones who would put in the warrant or the approval or what's required. They would make the recommendation.
Yes, but there are circumstances such as the real estate, and I forget the one Libby mentioned this morning. They do have, ability to appropriate through their regular meetings, not through town meeting. In certain circumstances, and that's what we're requesting. So yes, the money would come from all these different pots, but the actual appropriation, if we are successful, would be through a select board meeting.
Okay. That's,
Yeah. We wouldn't have to wait for the town meeting. It comes from all these different funds, wherever Jamie and Brian, pull the money and
Yeah.
find best distributed.
Is that clear from in this paper? I don't think it is.
No, but I think it will be. I'll in the warrant article, I think we should probably maybe define that a little. Actually, I think it'll just say from airport revenues or funds. I have to check that.
We gotta be sure we don't run afoul of some other rule, you know, because it's,
Mina was very, very knowledgeable on this stuff. And he municipal law, enterprise, funds, the whole 9 yards. So I count on him for that one.
all right. Okay. Sorry, anything else on the financials?
That's all I have.
Any questions on the financials?
Oh, I must say one thing too. I was unable to make the select board meeting, and Noah filled in for me and did a tremendous job, so I want to thank him for that.
Yeah, he got 0 questions.
That's what happens when you make a lot of money. I guess.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
He did do a very nice job. That's true. All right, thank you. And your report, Mr. Rafter?
On the project side of the house, the administrative office work is complete. Everybody's moved back in. Very nice job. The hold room phase 2, we're working through some punch list items. The runway markings, there were 2 projects, centerline grinding and painting and displaced threshold markings. They've all been completed. It was, I'll say, challenging. We were doing night work in August. We don't like to do any work on that runway in August, but we had to get it done in order to meet our certification requirements. So thank goodness that's complete. The ALP geometry issue, we're still waiting for feedback. And we have a meeting tomorrow with FAA on our capital improvement plan, as well as the taxiway echo scoping. So I will ask the status of that. At our previous meeting, they asked us the status, and we informed them that it was on their colleague's desk. So we'll see where that stands. The EAEIS, the work continues. We had a call on September 5th, involved all the agencies involved, reviewing all of the projects involved in the ENF. And we should be starting to see some reports coming out of that within the next month or so. PFC application, McFarland Johnson is drafting the second application. They're working on finalizing what is known as Attachment H, which identifies the projects. And I'll have that to the commission before we send that out for review by the airlines. Bunker Road drainage issue. There's a couple of developments in that, and it's a 2-part process or project. One, I've been talking to Jacobs Engineering about looking at the solution on the edge of the road, if you will, as well as a maintenance plan for all drainage, as Commissioner Gasparo had suggested. But I also had a visit today from one of our tenants, Phil Marks from Atlantic Aeolus. Under his property is the infiltrator system for the drainage on Bunker Road. He has uncovered it and looked, and it's all built up. It has a lot of issues. He's given us an estimate if he were to replace it, and he said he would do it through a rental abatement. I'd like to move forward with that, assuming that procurement and Attorney General or Brian Turbot are all good with that. It's a unique situation where the work that would have to be done is on the leasehold of Atlantic Aeolus, and it's underneath his property. So we would own the asset at the end of it, but again, he's in a good position to do the work. I just have to make sure we're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
And it affects his access as well as everyone else on that road. So if the commission is not, if there's no objection, I'd like to move forward under that circumstance, assuming that, we get approval from the proper procurement folks and everything to look into an abatement.
How much are we talking about?
It's about 18,000, I believe.
So isn't it under the threshold anyway of the,
It's above the 10,000 bid threshold.
but isn't there a 25,000?
I don't, that's why I have to say, I have to check procurement. He literally walked in like just before I came over here.
On the threshold of quotes, you have to see quotes.
Yeah, right,
So it's under 10 is,
right, but between 10 and, isn't it between 10 and 25?
it's 10 and 50.
10 and 50? So, maybe we should, just as a matter of, I mean, I, you know, have visions of 2010 all over again. Or whenever it was, 2009. The restaurant,
No,
you know, the tenant in possession doing work. And it just makes me a little nervous.
I would like to see, I think it could be beneficial,
Yeah,
and, but perhaps, we should have McFarland Johnson look at whatever he's proposing,
and
right? And, you know, cost it out from an engineering side of things.
it would be Jacobs.
Or
That project has
Jacobs,
been
whichever
transferred
one
to
of
Jacob.
them.
right.
Try not to get that to be half the cost of the project.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah, just a simple
just an
review, yep.
engineering, you know, review.
Look at it and, yeah.
Of what it is that he's proposing, even if it's not a fully developed set of plans. And then I think they could get you a, you know, plus or minus.
Right,
You know, whether it's something that's in the ballpark or advise you.
it's way
from an
out or
engineering perspective.
add this or do, yeah. And we would also have legal draft the amendment to the agreement as well, so. With the condition that if it didn't work, we wouldn't pay for
But
it.
for drainage work at that
Yeah.
cost, that's not, he's not, it's nothing, you know,
He's not padding the bill.
no, drainage is
Yeah.
very expensive.
Okay, so we will proceed down that path and present it at the next commission meeting for official action. The fuel farm rehabilitation, that project was transferred to Jacobs, and they are coming up to speed on it, but there are some other critical deadlines that they have to meet with Taxiway Echo and some other projects that they're doing first. And as I mentioned earlier, Taxiway Echo scoping meeting is tomorrow up in Boston, along with our capital improvement plan. On the RFP bid side of the house, there's a number of projects, some of which are recurring: legal service contract update, appraisal services, fuel farm inspections, on-call engineering, parking management, and a number of others. We're also working through the fuel supply procurement process. Katie has talked to Brian Turbot, and we're being guided through that. So we'll be negotiating with two firms, and we'll be using the aviation exclusion on for that one. On the operations side of the house, Labor Day holiday results, the gallons sold were 92,786 for that holiday period, which is up 19% or 14,510 gallons from last year. The sales were up 86,092, and it's the highest since we began tracking in 2011. And you'll see in our statistics here where the fuel sales are. Labor Day weekend was a tremendous effort by all, understanding that we pumped all of that fuel with probably half of our seasonal staff gone, and it was an all hands on deck. We had Johnny out marshaling airplanes, Lisa riding in golf carts. It was,
Tom's on the ramp.
I was on the ramp, yeah, I met Andrea at the airplane. Kirby's driving a bus. We were all out there, everybody. So it was a tremendous effort, and
Tom was just showing off for your benefit.
I have to say too, we received two very complimentary letters, and they came in just today, so we can put them in next month's packet, from American Airlines about how well everything went and how well we all worked with them, and they were very appreciative of the fact that somebody was there, you know, to make the necessary changes. So that worked out very well.
Well, I'll bring it up in our comments.
We'll be doing at the October meeting a summer review, but we are doing an internal summer review for functionality to see some of the things that worked, some of the things that didn't work, where we can improve, and that type of thing. And that's coming up this week. Any questions before I move on to statistics? Okay, the operations were up 22.85%. We haven't seen something like that in quite a
Oh,
while.
wow.
Over last July, and the southwest ramp were up 1.8%. Employments were also up 8.09 over last July. However, Cape Air saw an 8% decrease in employments. United's employments were up 9% for July. Delta saw a 38% decrease, or 548 passengers for the month. JetBlue had a 15% increase, or 1,998 passengers in employments. Nantucket Air was up 28%. Tradewinds was down 7%, and Retrix was down 14%. American was up 28%, or 1,108 passengers. And in the various markets, the Washington market, JetBlue was down 17%, or 214 passengers. American was up 1%, or 33. Total market for Washington was down 4%, or 181 passengers. The Boston market, Cape Air had a 2% increase. JetBlue was up 3%. Market total was up 3%, or 186 passengers. New Bedford traffic continued to decline, was down 203 passengers. United in the Newark market was up 9%, or 281 passengers. The White Plains market, Cape Air experienced a 5% increase. JetBlue was new to the market this year, carried 1,402 passengers. Retrix 22 passengers, and total for the White Plains market was up 1,434 passengers.
So that's significant.
Yes, and you'll see an increase. Remember that increase in White Plains, that's part of the New York market. The Hyannis market for July, Cape Air was down 95%, but 250 packs. Nantucket Air was up 28%. Retrix was down 14. Overall, Hyannis market was down 9%, or 182 passengers.
Excuse me, Tom, back to White Plains. Do we have any indication from Tradewinds or some of those other guys of how their passenger loads were?
I thought Tradewind was down 7%, and their primary market is
White Plains.
White Plains.
Okay.
So in the JFK market, JetBlue was down 20%, or 1,698 passengers. That sounds like a bad thing, but then as you go on to LaGuardia market, American was up significantly, 1,044 passengers. JetBlue flew 2,380 passengers. Delta was down by about 548 packs, and Retrix discontinued that service. So the total market for LaGuardia was up 140%, or 2,847 passengers. So there seems to be a shift from Kennedy over to LaGuardia, and even some of it leaking up to White Plains. Charlotte traffic on American was up 14%, very good load factors. Vineyard traffic continued to decline, was down 34%, but that's only 37 passengers. And the new Southern Airways service, I think it's, it started a little bit late in the season. Providence had 45 passengers on 23 flights, Norwood 43 passengers on 20 flights, and New Haven 25 passengers on 12 flights. On the fuel side of the house, Jet A for July were up 8.4%, or 31,594 gallons. And for August, we were up 1.19, or 5,000 gallons over last year. I just want you to look at the number for August. We pumped over 435,000 gallons of jet fuel. We haven't seen that as long as I've been here keeping records. That's a lot of jet fuel. The avgas for July was down 1.4%. For August, it was down 11.2%. And freight continues to climb, was up 4.75% over last July. And you can see the increase by the different carriers. Noise complaints are down slightly, but still a significant number for July. It was down from 59 to 57, and the details are in the report there. One other note I'd like to make before I finish is the commission had previously approved my travel to San Antonio, where I'm moderating a session for the National Airports Conference, but unfortunately it falls on the same day as the commission meeting. I will be glad to turn it over to Noah. I'm sure he can handle it, if that's okay with the chair and the commissioners.
It's fine with me. Any,
Thank you. That's my
I mean,
report.
he handled the Board of Selectmen. He should be able to handle us.
I think he just found out about that. But no.
All right. Thank you. Any, no personnel matters?
No.
All right. Thank you.
think that's
Any
everything.
questions for Mr. Rafter? Are there any commissioners' comments? You had talked about JetBlue maybe attending our meeting in
Are they going to be attending the October meeting? Greg Jenkins?
I mean, the question is whether we should give the other airlines a chance, at least tell them that we're doing this.
Sure.
If they wanted
we can
to.
let them know, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Because again, James Seidler from American was very complimentary today, too.
Okay. Good. Nothing else from anybody? All right. Is there public comment? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session, not to return to public session, under General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A, to review and possibly release minutes, and under Clause 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding the Gatto property, where the chair has determined that an open session may have detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission. And 3, to discuss strategy with respect to the litigation regarding Walsh, where the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental effect on the litigating position of the Airport Commission.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a
Second.
second? How do you vote, Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Ms. Topham?
Aye.
Ms. Planzer?
Aye.
Mr. Gasparo? The chair votes aye. Noah?